Thank you to the DAR team for having me here, and I'm very glad to be sharing some of the insights we have had in Germany on fasting and especially on religious fasts. It is a universal phenomenon. If you look around the world, there are so many different forms of fasting, but there are forms of fasting everywhere. This is my declaration of interests. And I would like to start from the physiology of fasting, because as you can see, it's very diverse. What happens in fasting is that, for example, the cellular stress resistance goes up, neurogenesis even improves, autophagy is taking place. And as we, of course, know, metabolism changes and inflammation goes down. This is from a publication of a colleague in Science in 2018. I can really recommend it because it's very beautifully made and it has all these charts that we can see that fasting takes place in all the tissues of the organism. It's a huge change. And this is from the same publication. If we look at different forms of fasting, caloric restriction or time-restricted eating, longer fasts, shorter fasts, with different macronutrients balance or even complete abstinence from food and drink, we can see that they all have, in the end, a certain change in the metabolism that helps the organism learn certain things and make it more healthy in the end. And why is this so? Why is there such a concert of effects during fasting in our organism? And actually, not only in our organism, it's there in all organisms that have been tested or examined until now, from the yeast cell to the mouse to the primate to a human being. It seems to be a conserved mechanism which has in it the adaptations to help us be more flexible in a possibly hostile environment. And this effect of human or living organisms in general to be able to adapt is called hormesis. And there's quite some colleagues now, especially in the US, that have found out, well, hormesis is the new thing, the next big thing. But actually, having worked with fasting, all of you probably know it's not the next big thing. It has always been a big thing. And talking about diabetes in especially, we know that metabolic flexibility is something that we're looking for in organisms to be able to be more resilient towards the development of diabetes. Looking at this chart now, we see that a stressor, in this case fasting, but also sports are a stressor, for example, right? So any stressor that is given to the organism in a certain dosage can bring about a sweet spot, a good reaction, a healthy reaction of an organism. Of course, if we have too much stress, if we fast for too long or do too much sports without having been used to it, then it can, of course, be detrimental. And in the medical field, we are very interested in finding this sweet spot, which is different for every organism. Looking at fasting, of course, you probably have wondered what kind of fasting I mean. As I said, it's a diversified phenomenon all over the world. So we had, in the last 3 years, we had discussions with experts all around the globe to see what would they understand under fasting and how can we describe the phenomenon. And we came up with 24 definitions that have been published in Cell Metabolism in August last year. And you can see that we tried to diversify according to motivational aspects, types of restriction, and temporal aspects. I'll just zoom in into two of them because the motivational aspects, of course, you're very familiar with the religious fast. Any religious motivation lead to religious fasting, but there's also therapeutic fasts, medical fasts, when a doctor prescribes a diabetic a fast, for example. But looking at the types of restriction, I hope you can see it. We have dry fasts where no water and no food is allowed. But also we have water-only fasts, modified fasting where people can have some juices or soups, etc. So there have been different types that have been developed in the different disciplines even of medicine, if we go away from the religious fasts. And looking at the temporal aspects, of course, we have fasts of a longer duration, a shorter duration. They can be repeated or not. And you will see all of these differentiations also in religious fasts around the world. I tried to make a very short overview on these different fasts. As you can see, in many religions, dry fasts are the standard. As such, you are, of course, very familiar with Ramadan. Similar to that is the Baha'i fast of 19 days, but we also have 25-hour dry fasts. For example, in Judaism on Yom Kippur, or in the Mormon religion, they also have every first Sunday of the month a 25-hour dry fast. We also have longer dry fasts in Jainism with 36 hours or even 3 days in some Orthodox churches, for example, the Greek Orthodox tradition, but also the Syrian, Ethiopian, or Eritrean Orthodox traditions. So this is quite a universal phenomenon to have dry fasting of different durations. There is also time-restricted eating models in different religions. For example, in the Buddhist religion, there is some parts or some denominations of monks that would eat only until noon and then stop eating. So they have around 20 hours of fast every day. And we have, of course, dietary restrictions in many Christian denominations where they would, for example, not have any animal origin foods for almost 200 days or even more a year. And then there is this category of prolonged fluid-only or water-only fasts, which is usually more in the medical field, but for example, in Germany, it's practiced often by Christians for the preparation of the body for meditation and so on. So that's also a category we should probably have in mind when people say they fast for a religious reason. The clinical aspects of these fasts is, of course, that as medical doctors, we need to check contraindications. We need to adjust medication. For each of these fasts, if we go back, it's different things that we have to acknowledge to see whether they can be given during the fast or not. And very broadly, I would say healthy people, there are some things that we have to look at, electrolyte and fluid balance and so on. When oral medications are taken, most of the oral medications need to be adapted. Some have to even be left out during the fast or stopped. And especially injected medications like insulin, for example, and also some of the psychopharmaca, they can change a lot in their serum availability. That is things that need to be monitored. And what I want to finish off with is the accompaniment of behavioral changes, because I think this is a potential that especially religious fasts entail in them, and it is so beautiful when we as medical doctors can actually enhance the effect of the fast that people do in trying to help them find out what wealth there is in this, what they're doing. And just as a short insight into this, we did a qualitative study with interviews of people that did the Baha'i fast, which, as I said, is a diurnal dry fast. So they fast for 19 days, just like in Ramadan, over the course of the daytime. And here's some quotes from the interviews that the people shared. Um, one thing that we saw is that the people described a somatic experience, which they felt more at home in their body. One said, I think it is really this experience, this bodily experience of consciously restricting something during the day and feeling what it does within the body and that it is actually good. We had the aspect of well-being. An example of this is in this quote. It's cool to fast. Take a break to tell the body, now you'll do something else. That's good. You get out of your normal routine, your normal lifestyle, to step aside. And sometimes it hurts, but because it pushes you, gives you another pulse, that's refreshing. That's beneficial. Our participants described more mindfulness. For example, one said, I had this feeling of becoming one with myself again. Another said that it's an aspect of freedom inside, and quite some of our interviewees actually said something along these lines. If I can simply say, no, I can decide now, even if my body wants something else, then I am free. And of course, people also reported that they would change habits. For example, one said, 19 days is not long, but it seems to be long enough to establish new habits. Now, looking at all of this, we can see that there is a lot that people reflect on, feel during a fast, change during a fast. And for example, smokers, they don't even smoke during a fast. That's such a large change in behavior that I think is worth reflecting on and using in our everyday practice when people actually are in a fast and they are immersed in this wealth of fasting. And living in a time where almost everybody is now speaking about planetary health. The Eat Lancet Commission even has um, proposed things that we should do, how we should eat in order to preserve the health of our planet. I think fasting should be or is part of the answer. Of course, it can enhance public health. For example, if people decide to really stick to some of the changes they did in their dietary habits during the religious fast. And it can help the transformation of food systems because it changes our mindfulness, but also our habits in regard to food and to how much we eat, maybe. So there is a lot of reflection that we can profit from through fasting. Summing up, I would say that caloric restriction and fasting enhance health and longevity in all organisms studied to date. Effects have been described on the molecular, cellular, organ, and clinical levels. Fasting as a therapy shows great potential for medical care, especially in chronic diseases, but it also entails challenges, as all of you, I'm sure, know, especially when people take medication. So medical supervision, in my opinion, is indispensable when fasting under medication. I want to thank the fasting team in Berlin, which has done a lot of work over the past years and would love to exchange views with you, exchange experiences with you. If you want to join us for our fasting conference this July, please feel invited, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.